Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Factions of Freedom. I've called this one Terraforming Earth, and this is the Impact series, or more or less the Impact installment of a series. This is a one of three. There's so much information, so much that I have to go over. There's no way that I could pack it in a single episode. So with this particular video, this particular installment, we're going to be looking at things like how long these aliens have been here, how long this operation has been going on, how many different ways we're impacted by it, and some of the other aspects to it, just the dimensions of what I would consider the alien agenda. So ironically enough, and this is what I find hilarious, YouTube took my video down. One of my very few videos that I put up, Terraforming Earth, it was actually the part one. So I'm back with it and letting it play again. However, this time, for people who are listening with the audio, there will be no audio for it, as well as the people who are watching with video. But what you guys will be seeing is basically Terraforming Earth, the video that I had prepared initially for you guys. I'm going to basically use it as a timeline to illustrate a lot of different things that have been going on. Like I said, the initial video that I intended to do for Terraforming Earth was basically trying to go over, the alien agenda, the New World Order, and how we've had interaction with aliens without Roswell. And I'm gonna go quickly through this timeline because this video is gonna take a while. People who are watching the video, you guys have your time, you can watch this. But in 1901 or 1909, in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, they saw horseshoe-shaped ships with grays. And what ended up happening, a couple bandits ran into the actual aliens. Apparently their ship was downed and they saw it in a cave. It was very strange. 1923, that's whenever the U.S. started dealing with the French. When what they started seeing is Foo Fighters, flying saucers, and things like that. 1934, that's whenever the LA Times started reporting things such as the underground city of reptilians. And it was on January 29th, actually, 1934. You guys can look you can actually go back and look these up. But in 1937, an Army engineer started helping construct the Dulce base in Archuleta, New Mexico. In 1940, that's whenever we started hearing more encounters of different types of gray entities, flying saucers, and all kinds of other different things that were going on at that time. 1946, that was with the Bikini Island testing. People started reportedly seeing glimmering objects in the sky and all kinds of other things. Like I said, the Foo Fighters and Operation Crossroads. And I'm trying to go through this all in a rapid fire fashion so you guys can kind of get caught up because, like I said, YouTube took this down. I thought I had it up, but apparently they don't agree with some of my content. So moving on now. In 1950, that's whenever people started having contact with the Space Brothers. People saying there's not a lot of time left. You need to turn back your ways. Do not invest in nuclear weaponry. Do not invest in that kind of combustion technology. You're literally ripping holes into space-time fabric. In 1954, and I'll come back to this time frame again, that's whenever we had the Eisenhower-Gray Treaty, or the Grietas Treaty. Okay, and I feel like that's a very significant part in time because basically we were signed over for technology. So I'll definitely come back to that. In 1960, there was more construction of the underground tunnels in Los Alamos, New Mexico, basically leading them to California, Sandia, Arizona, Nevada, all kinds of different other underground bases throughout the west coast of America. And what we have to really realize, because this is the reason why I'm trying to flash through everything, like I said, in such a fashion, is there has been contact, whether or not there are pre-existing civilizations here on the planet, and this is kind of where the reptilians theory comes into play, this, that, and the third. But whether there were entities here on this planet prior to us inhabiting it, or entities that are here cohabiting the planet with us, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is dealt with basically outside of what we would consider the normal human realm, or as in Jade Helm 15 puts it, the human domain. You see, what we're dealing with is underground civilizations, the secret space program, black budget projects, and all really the behind the scenes of a lot of different things. So let me get back to this. 1961, that's whenever the Betty Barney Hill abduction occurred, right? The infamous case where Betty drew a star map, which is apparently Zeta Reticuli. That's where that's where the grays come from. In 1970, that's whenever the rise of cattle mutilations came into play, and people like Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Linda Moulton Howe, and a number of other people have researched into that whole topic. Crop circles, like I said, cattle mutilations, and what that really does mean in the larger scale of things. So it's definitely not just people getting probed; it is genetic material being harvested, and I'll come back to that as well. So in 1979, that's whenever we have Phil Schneider talking about the Dulce Wars, right? Well, how he had participated in them, but and that's an even crazier story. The fact that there is, like I said before, the construction of the Dulce base, what that base, roughly 50 or so years ago, is that they had all of this technology. What they were basically doing, with this breakaway civilization, creating these types of technologies, interacting with these types of entities. Okay, and I know people are going to think that this is wild, this is nuts, this is out there. Well, if you've been paying attention to any of the other work, this should fit in perfectly fine. And to kind of here, let me finish this timeline because there's a few more. 1980s into the 1990s, that's whenever we had Dr. David M. Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, and I'll talk about them as well later on, and how they had a huge hand in the information that we have as far as the alien abduction phenomena. And in 1986, that's whenever we had the Rendlesham Forest incident, whenever two people at the RAF Bentwaters base came into contact with a glowing object, what they would later on be able to recall through hypnotic regression, what they would be able to recall as a triangular shaped object. One of the actual soldiers at the time touched the object and had ones and zeros flush his mind, basically sending him in a mad rage, not thinking, not really having time to think, having his brain basically rewired. And I'll talk about that as well, binary code. And in 1995, this is with Phil Schneider, as I said before earlier, where he was working in the Dulce base and he had his encounter. But to get all of that out there, like I said, just to finish that off for you guys to get a good timeline of basically what we're talking about, is we're talking about how we live now in a society that has been wildly affected by what I would consider alien technology. And the reason why this is coming up in basically sequence after the transhuman reality is because you cannot talk about transhumanism or the technocracy without dabbling into some of this. And what I will be talking about to a degree, whenever I made a post about this, what I'm basically trying to do is reverse engineer transhumanism through the alien agenda mindset. Basically asking the question, how did we get here? You see, how did we get to the point to where we're able to blend our genes, to where we're able to alter our DNA at a commercial level? You see, so there's a number of things like that I'm going to be jumping in and out of. So I wanted to get the timeline out there so you guys could understand that we have been in contact with extraterrestrial entities or interdimensional beings, whatever you want to look at them as, for quite some time. And they have affected society in more ways than we think. Clearly. Clearly. So much so that we have been huddled into an American or a global hub, a box, a farm. And what we need to really understand is that there is more, as I always keep saying, is there's more to you. There's more to the human being. There's more than we think. There's more outside of the realm of perception, and we affect things in ways that we don't think. As I keep saying, we are multi-dimensional entities. But there's only so much that I can cover in this episode, in this installment. So with that being said, like I said, let's jump into it. So I want to jump into 1954 with the Eisenhower Gray Treaty, like I said before, where we had advanced technology given to us or in exchange for live human DNA, right? At this time frame, what they ended up doing, and this is what we have to really understand, is because we're living in their future. You see, their future. They made these choices in our past. All right, so we're living in that mindset, right? And this is how I said I'm going to try to reverse engineer the information from there. Okay, so with the alien DNA, or with the human DNA that we were given to aliens for technology, right? What did we use it for? We used it to create the transhumanist agenda, right? To have human-animal hybrids. What did they do with our DNA? They made things such as human-alien hybrids. That is the whole hybridization program. Okay, like I said before, with David M. Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, the whole alien abduction phenomena is the continuation of that program. The transhumanist agenda on the military aspect is what we're talking about, or at least on the civilian aspect is what we're talking about, because there are so many different forces at play, right? So in this time frame, if you guys are for the people that are listening, well, what we have right now is your typical 1950s kind of early 60s depiction of a space brother, right? And this is what would be considered a different type of alien, or another extraterrestrial being. But what we have to realize as well, and I'll try to get into this to a degree with the transhumanist aspect, is that although we have alien entities interacting with us, because we have the technology to some degree, with genome editing, with splicing, with CRISPR-Cas9, genetic modification, designer babies, human-animal hybrids, I think it would be fair to say that at some point we are making aliens, okay? So as I said before, we're going to be taking a look at, like I said, the paradigms of what it means to be a person, to be human, and how, in regards to the alien abduction phenomena, the alien agenda, things like that, how we're being affected by it. Because we already have, reptilian beings, as I said before, inhabitants of the planet that either cohabitate with us or are subterranean. You see, they also have things such as the Nordics, these tall, blonde-haired, like I said, the space brother types of people that are saying, stop your ways, don't follow through on nuclear energy. Walk-ins, we have different, like there's so many grays, Pleiadians. There's so many different branches of life that we already have documentable from this time frame. Like I said, with the Eisenhower Gray Treaty, that explains the reality that we're in, and how with the technology, with the interactions of these creatures, these entities, how they have affected us. You see. So fast forward to June 8th of 2016, earlier this year, right? Because basically what I'm trying to do for you guys is compress a lot of information, basically decades. I'm trying to compress and compile information in a summarized fashion, like I said, reverse engineering transhumanism where we have been to the point to where we are now. You see. So fast forward to June 8th, 2016, right? And it was accepted December 25th, 2015. And you can actually go look this up. It's in the American Journal of Modern Physics. It was put out by the Science Publishing Group. And it's for Ruggiero Maria Santilli. I hope I pronounced that appropriately. And we'll actually have a video of him coming up later on where he talks about this actual paper. But the title goes as this: Apparent detection via new telescopes with concave lenses of otherwise invisible terrestrial entities, ITEs. And it goes like this, because I'm only going to read a quick snippet of it for you guys. You know, got to leave it so that you guys can go out and study this yourselves. You know, but it goes like this: by using telescopes with concave lenses known as a Santilli telescope, trademark and patent pending by the U.S. publicly traded company Thunder Energies Corporation, we review preceding evidence for the apparent existence of antimatter galaxies, antimatter asteroids, and antimatter cosmic rays. Independently from these astrophysical detections, we present for the first time evidence for the apparent existence of entities in our terrestrial environment that are solely visible via telescopes with concave lenses, while being invisible to our eyes, and to conventional Galileo telescopes with convex lenses, which leave entities with dark images in the background of digital cameras attached to the Santilli scopes. These entities are here called invisible terrestrial entities of the first kind, or ITE1s, or a dark ITE. We then present also, for the first time, evidence for the apparent existence in our terrestrial environment of additional entities that are also visible to telescopes with concave lenses while being invisible to our eyes, and to conventional telescopes with convex lenses, which entities leave bright images in the background of digital cameras. These additional entities are here called invisible terrestrial entities of the second kind, ITE2s, or a bright ITE. It is pointed out that both types of entities generally move in the night sky over sensitive areas, and their behavior generally suggests unauthorized surveillance. This paper has been motivated by the significance and the diversification of the collected evidence, as well as available independent confirmations that warrant systematic inspections of the sky over our sensitive civilian, industrial, and military installations via telescopes with concave lenses, so as to detect possible unauthorized surveillance. So, as they said earlier this year, because like I said, this was published through the Science Publishing Group earlier this year, June 8th of 2016, the existence of invisible terrestrial entities. And as they said before, having unauthorized surveillance around sensitive civilian, industrial, and military installations. So if this is, like I said, our present, in the 1950s time frame, we have to, like I said, work back to where things are these days. You see. So as I said, fast forward to where we are now. What we have to realize back then, with the establishment of things like NASA, with people like Jack Parsons, Aleister Crowley, and Werner von Braun, these are known occultists these days. The same way we now know that most people in power are also occultists these days. You see, I'm not even going to go off on Pope Francis right now. I don't have the time. But they have all come out as saying that we get our information from the other side. Now, if we have papers being disclosed of invisible terrestrial entities bleeding into our reality, where do you think these entities come from? Where do you think this information that they get comes from? And why are they bestowing it upon us. You see? So we've also, what we've got to look at as well, with the other side, with the ether, with the medium, with space, with all of these different synonyms or even metaphors for what could be considered the outside realm of our perception. We have been having either interdimensional beings, spirits, demons, or aliens all visiting Earth over time. And even as Aleister Crowley said it, they will call them by different names. These days we're calling them interdimensional beings because we have things like CERN that do create portals. And I'll talk about that as well. And how our whole understanding of what would be considered scientific, or mainstream science, is wrong. We're looking at things in a three-dimensional gravitational heliocentric mindset. We need to look at it in an electric universe. Nikola Tesla has talked about this as well, and he has also talked about communicating with the other side through his spirit crystal radio. You see, so what we basically have to get into when we're looking at all of this is apparent interaction with some kind of extraterrestrial force, apparent interaction with something not of this world. As far as terraforming, I'll get into that later, but we have to build the foundation of understanding how we have been terraformed, or how we're being terraformed, and where these aggressors come from. A lot of this information, a lot of the things that are coming out now, as I keep saying, because this is their future, our past. A lot of this information comes from the occult Nazis, right? As I said before, with this kind of information, with this kind of technology, it's occult inspired. And I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place with certain things, but I'm trying to build for you guys a picture of the times that we are in, and how these aliens, or at least these extraterrestrial beings, these invisible terrestrial entities, these whatever you want to call them, they have affected how we are interacting with this world, simply because they don't want us to change. They don't want us to necessarily be affected by the reality that they're basically imposing onto us. I'll put it to you this way. Anthony Patch recently asked the question, or posed the question, what would you do? Imagine yourself as an alien civilization, if you could. What would you do if scientists were building pockets, putting holes into your world? What would that do to your reality? It would mess a lot of things up. It would change your basic understanding of reality. The world as you know it would change, right? What we have to look at as well, like I said, with all of this, is external factors, external forces coming into play here, messing with us, or not necessarily even messing with us, interacting with us. And that's why I said you can't look at this without coming into contact with modern day transhumanism. And how I would like to break this down, as I said before, they have used the human DNA to go through this human alien hybrid program, this hybridization program. Then their orders now are integration. We have used their technology to obviously enhance us. You see, things like fiber optics, genome splicing, cloning, even to some degree. But to get back on point with the Nazis, speaking of cloning, the boys from Brazil talk about that extensively. I mean, there's a book on it. You guys just have to check it out. You see, and what we have to realize, because as I said before, Werner von Braun has already talked about getting their information from the other side. Hitler clearly gave himself over to the other side. You see, with the Thule Society, vril energy, anti-gravitics. I mean, a lot of the things that we're even using to this day have been basically just refurbished versions of what technology the Nazis were able to accomplish. But this is what they were doing in top secret. What we have to realize now is, outside of this, with the breakaway civilization, they have created and successfully created this alien civilization, basically this reality to where we're I don't even know how to explain it truly, to where we're being affected on so many different levels, to where we're almost tethered, as I've said before, to a different universe, to a different reality. And this is why I talk about things like this, the transitional time frame that we're in, the paradigm shift, the coming into age from the age of Aquarius. But we have to look at, like I said, to get back to point, with the Nazis and the technology that they've basically handed down to us. As I've said before, we got the scientists, the Russians got the equipment. They carried on their operations here. The Nazis, they worship the black sun. They worship the cube of Saturn. IXXI. I don't have the time to go into how deep Saturn is, but whenever you look at the swastika, when you look at things like the Mecha cube, the black sun, even in the Vatican, and I've talked about that as well, how they've infiltrated the Vatican with the black sun. We really have to understand, how deep this stuff goes. So these people have obviously been in contact with some kind of extraterrestrial force or some interdimensional force for quite some time. Lucifer is, as most people would say it, Lucifer the light bringer, and I'll get into that later on as well, and how through his mad crave for power, he's basically trying to drag us into a hell with him. So all the technology that we have now mostly is occult inspired. It's not divinely appointed or divinely ordained, so to speak. It's forbidden knowledge. As I said before, we're changing the very fabric of what it means to be human. We're altering our DNA. And for the people that are listening right now, audio, there is a video where it says that the U.S. has approved genetic modification for humans, followed by a clip of ectogenesis. And for people who don't know what ectogenesis is, it's an artificial womb. It's whenever it allows for humans to be mass-produced and customized. They're changing the very form of humanity in so many different ways. That's why it's called terraforming, through things like chemtrails, GMOs, vaccines, all of the different things that we have, that we're ingesting, the toxins, everything, how it all eventually add up. It eventually adds up. It bioaccumulates in us. It creates a poison. It creates how we are affected here in the electric universe. And I'll kind of get into that theory, the idea that we are multidimensional creatures and that we do put off vibes and frequencies, and that we do transmit something to a larger goal. But what's happening now, the entire point of this segment of the video, is to illustrate to you guys how we have been slowly brought into this point of lulled sleep. What should be a great awakening is being masqueraded as a long slumber for us. This is why we're constantly telling people to wake up, because we can't see how many different ways we're being affected. As I said before, this is a long time coming. This is a plan set back in the 50s. But I've been ranting, clearly. So with the Nazis, the technology that we have now, genome editing, cloning, all of the different things that we have, designer babies, you don't think that they'll deliver this technology to us and we'll use it to disrupt society? You don't think that this could be the last point in time to where our genes are pure? I mean, if we have, like I said before, chemtrails spraying us every day, I mean, NASA has admitted to it, CIA has admitted to it, I think the United Nations even admitted to it. If we have chemtrails spraying us, altering our DNA, vaccines that are altering our DNA, food that is just disgusting that you wouldn't even feed to your dog, you know, affecting not only us but our epigenetics, so creating all kinds of different mutations. If you don't think that this is one of the very few times to where we are the last normal humans, this is why I'm consistently saying we need to remember what it means to be human, then you're confused. This is not the episode for you. I've been throwing out the word hybrid as if it's passé, but it's because there are so many different factors that come into play when looking at, as I said before, the aspect of being terraformed, the transhumanist agenda, the alien agenda, and all of what I would basically see going on in a larger aspect these days. So like I said before, their past, or our past, their future. So whenever we look at things these days in an electric universe model, to where we're discovering that Nikola Tesla was correct, and that scientists, how they've even discovered the fourth state of matter, ionized gas, or basically plasma, and how we are enveloped in plasma. It is but isn't, you see, and how this ties into us having a worldview, or at least a reality where everything is interconnected, or at least everything in this realm, so to speak, is connected. Because that is one thing too that we have to keep in mind. This particular, I'm not even sure what you would want to call it, this domain, this three-dimensional time frame that we have, this sphere, this plane, this whatever you want to call it, it's protected. And this is why whenever I say, you know, we have magicians, warlocks, summoners, techno-sorcerers, people who are using technology in archaic fashions, or I mean archonic fashions, evil ways. They're punching holes in our reality. I mean, but we have to look at as well, you know, with things like astrology, astronomy, the cosmology, how we affect, like I said, the universe, the electric universe, how we are affecting, you know, this world, this time frame that we're in. We have to realize that there are people who have nefarious means and who have been studying this type of stuff for longer than we know, and have practiced these types of things. They are contacting these entities and trying to basically bring them in. And some have actually bled in through, as I said before, with the invisible terrestrial entities. It's because our perception, and this is why, you know, it requires a certain mind to understand some of these things. Our perception is off. I'll put it to you this way, on having right perception. Project Stargate, it was born out of remote viewers that were so good that basically they became spies. I actually have some of the documents here, and let's read from the executive summary. It was released 1996 of December, and here's the executive summary. Studies of paranormal phenomena have nearly always been associated with controversy. Despite the controversy concerning their nature and existence, many individuals and organizations continue to be avidly interested in these phenomena. The intelligence community is no exception. Beginning in the 1970s, it has conducted a program intended to investigate the application of one paranormal phenomena, remote viewing, or the ability to describe locations one has not visited. Conceptually, remote viewing would seem to be a tremendous potential utility for the intelligence community. Accordingly, a three-component program involving basic search operations and foreign assignments have been in place for some time. prior to transferring this program to a new sponsoring organization within the intelligence community, a thorough program was initiated. The part of the program review was conducted by the American Institutes of Research, AIR, a nonprofit private search organization consisted of two main components. The first component was a review of the research program. The second component was a review of the operational application of the remote viewing phenomena in the intelligence gathering. Evaluation of the foreign assignment component of the program was not within the scope of the present effort. And the research evaluation was this. To evaluate the research program, a blue ribbon panel was assembled. The panel included two noted experts in the area of parapsychology, Dr. Jessica Utz, a professor of statistics at the University of California, Davis, and Dr. Raymond Hyman, a professor at the psychology at the University of Oregon. In addition to their extensive credentials, they were selected to represent both sides of the paranormal controversy. Dr. Utz has published articles that view paranormal interpretations positively, while Dr. Hyman was selected to represent a more skeptical position. Both, however, are viewed as fair and open-minded scientists. So I'm not going to go on, definitely check that out. But basically what we have there, as I've talked about before as well, with the Foundry, the joint MIT-Harvard institution, where we have government-sponsored superhumans. We have operations like that going on more than you know. However, none of this information is being disclosed. This is why I only operate with the information that I get with the headlines to correlate the factors that we have publicly. And as I said before, our past, their present, or their future. Eventually I'll get it right. Eventually I will get it right. But the point I'm trying to make with this type of information is with things like Project Stargate, Manhattan Project, Operation High Jump, and even Project Paperclip. What that basically is a sum culmination of what we're realizing now. As I said before, techno sorcerers, people who are using technology and even paranormal means to contact interdimensional beings, invisible terrestrial or invisible extraterrestrial entities. And as I said, you can throw any kind of name on them as you want, but this is where we're at these days. So after scientists have discovered, this new state of being, what else have they undiscovered? What else have they not discovered? You see, we can't rely on modern science because a lot of the things that they're getting and a lot of the ways that things are coming out these days cannot be measured with modern science. However, with things like artificial intelligence, particle accelerators, nanobots, and chemical solutions that have computers in them, other ways of science are being discovered. But that's not where I'm trying to go with this particular episode. So whenever we look at things like this, the electric universe model, right there, Earth's magnetic field is weakening and we don't know why. It's because, like I said, we're through technotronic, techno sorcery laden ways, we're punching holes into our world, into our bubble. The magnetic ley line, and I'll get into this later, it's being harmed through things like chemtrails. It's being weakened. But this changes our cosmological perspective. It changes how we view ourselves, and as I said before, how we're interacting with the universe. And how did all of this stem from aliens? Well, we had entities come in from a different world and mess with us. You didn't think that was going to do something? I mean, Mandela effect or, alternate timeline, time slip or something? You see? But what's weird is a lot of this ties into, prophecy, the days of Noah. And that's a whole nother discussion. But we're living in a time frame now, as I've said before, a sci-fi time frame where things are going to get real strange if they haven't gotten strange already. So getting back to this, it changes our cosmological perspective on things. It confirms Tesla's research. and this is whenever we look at things like the Thunderbolts project, these documents that come out where they say that, we can't look at things with conventional science. We can't look at things like Galileo looked at it. No. We can't keep a mindset of like the 1600s. Yes, thank you fantastically for creating telescopes, but I'm sure have other ways of looking at the space that is around us. So while we're discovering, different states of being, with plasma, we're also understanding that there are different beings as well, different states of being, as well as different beings that come with that. We know things as gas, solid, liquid, and then human, right? That's that's how science works, right? That's it, guys. That's how we got here. Now that we're discovering things such as plasma, another state of being, whoa, we're also discovering other creatures. You see. So we have the Thunder Energies Corporation coming out, talking about how the universe is held together by a magnetic or electromagnetic field or electromagnetic force, not gravity. As I said before, confirming Tesla's research, showing us that everything does work in a vibratory fashion, that everything is energy, frequency, and intention. And this is what happens whenever we don't look at a world where we think it revolves around us. When we look at a world with a mindset of like, well, maybe there is something else out there. And maybe, just maybe, it's interacting with us and we can't tell. Elon Musk, my nefarious friend Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, and Michio Kaku have all come out saying, don't send signals into space. Right there, the U.S. Air Force is planning to alter our atmosphere with plasma bombs. Altering our atmosphere. Messing with, like I said, messing with our protective layer, the barrier that has been established to keep things out. As I said before, these technocrats have come out all saying how we shouldn't send signals into space. Strangely enough, what ends up happening when we do? We end up getting contact from these interdimensional beings. One thing that I think is CERN is so tricky. They always do things, I feel like, in the cover of night. And maybe I miss it. But they're planning to, with the CERN Awake project, to raise their typical 13 teraelectron volts to 20 quadrillion electron volts. So before, I think they were operating at, what do I have here? Amongst all these crazy notes. I think 11 teraelectron volts. I'm not entirely sure. And then they jumped to 13. And they ramped down for a bit. That's whenever the weasel happened. And they're ramping up to do the 20 quadrillion. Could this be because, well, there was that sacrifice, or the mock sacrifice, air quotes, a few weeks ago? Could it be that they have something in store? Clearly they know something we don't. Clearly they're trying to interact with something, or taking their orders from someone else, or they're driven by some other force. Clearly that must mean something. And this is how CERN is operating, on that electric universe mindset. There's no way you can't do that kind of physics working with simply gravity. I mean, I understand that, they're saying they're smashing protons and smashing atoms, speeding them up, and then smashing them together, and then looking at that energy and trying to use that as a gauge to what's in between, you see. But what they're basically doing is they're firing basically lasers, firing a different frequency, and then, like as other people have said before, tearing holes into our time-space fabric. And clearly, I know this sounds nuts, guys. Trust me, I know this sounds nuts. But this is why, as I said before, I can only cover this throughout a long period of time. This is just the beginning. This is where, as I said before, maybe I'll get it right this time. Our past, their future. They didn't know that whenever they gave a simple treaty to demons or aliens or creatures, they didn't think that all of this type of chaos would ensue. They didn't think that who would go wrong? What would go wrong? Clearly there would be some benefit. This is why, different black budget breakaway civilizations, military industrial complexes have existed. It's because of things like this, the deeper aspect of things. While we're living on the surface level of a lot of things, as Jade Helm puts it, the human domain and our comfortable little bubble, there are way bigger issues going on. And I try to illustrate this as well, as by not paying attention to race. If you guys are watching right now, you're seeing the invisible terrestrial entities of the first type and the second type. And for people that are listening, what we're basically looking at in the slides is just that, the idea that we have come into contact with other entities. While at the same time, British scientists plan to genetically modify human embryos after ethics committee approval, of course. Air quotes. Throw up those air quotes for you guys, because we know that with this, as I've said before, with this type of technology, with this type of information, they're at least 20 to 30 years ahead, 20 to 30 years advanced of where we are, which I feel like would be a great way for me to segue into. I commonly talk about ectogenesis, transhumanism, and how with things like designer babies, they're trying to create people. In the 1970s, Linda Moulton Howe, she was known for her work in cattle mutilations, and saying how they have surgical precision. Fast forward to these days, with ectogenesis and things like that, of that nature, we're realizing now that you don't necessarily need a womb to birth a human, right? And that's what we know these days. Back then, 30 years ago, in the 70s, Linda didn't know that. Linda only knew that hundreds of cows all over North America were being taken. All Linda knew was that people were disappearing, and as were cattle. And then we later found out that through things like hypnotic regression, underground bases, workers, and a number of other leaked information, basically, that these people who were in contact with these aliens, who were kidnapping and harvesting organs, they're hybridizing them. They're hybridizing people. These people that are being abducted, that are being taken, they're having sperm, they're having ova, they're having eggs, they're having organs, they're having things taken from them, genetic material, basically, and then having it repurposed, restructured, grown in these cows, in these cattle. And then fast forward a few more years later, after they've bred out a few problems, after they look normal, after you really can't tell the difference, they're being told to integrate with society. What we have to realize is that in so many different ways, this world is being reconfigured. The universe is being reconfigured. And we are being reconfigured with it. As I constantly say before, we are multidimensional creatures. We affect things more so than we know. We have tremendous power, and this is why these people are doing these types of things. They're doing these types of things to basically trap us here. As I said before, with the chemtrails, the chemtrails, the fracking, the vaccines, the GMOs, the geological chemistry of the planet, and how they're just messing with it. Subsequently, that's going to mess with us. Subsequently, that's going to mess with the biology of us. It's also going to mess with our transmission, or how we interact, as I've said before, with the electric universe. And I'll pose the question to you guys one more time. What would the opening of an interdimensional portal do to people's and your own reality? And this is Anthony Patch that's asking these types of questions. Who's giving these people the types of instructions to do these types of things? To terraform onto us, to carry on this type of way. These entities want to come in from the other side. And with things like CERN, they're succeeding. You know, they're able to come in here. They're able to bleed in. Or, as this article has said, that they like to frequent areas with unauthorized surveillance in sensitive civilian, industrial, and military installations. And that they act independently. And they don't have authorization, you see. So it's with things like CERN, where they're occultly punching holes into our universe, coming into contact with creatures like Aleister Crowley's lamb, to where they're telling them that they want to come in, that they have the keys to the abyss. As I said before, occultly inspired, coming from the Nazis. So if we know that the Nazis were involved heavily into the occult, as I said before, with the Thule Society sacrifices, you know, the whole Nazi campaign was basically an occult-inspired eugenics program where they were looking for the God-men. Is this not reminiscent of the transhumanist agenda, using technology to make themselves God-men? Is that not what's occurring? You see, divine involvement. God kept these barriers. Our realm, reality, or plane is protected by something. And by shooting plasma bombs, fracking, attacking our atmosphere, our ionosphere, and even changing the geological chemistry, the current occupiers have changed the frequency of the planet. The ley lines, right? The magnetic ley lines that stretch across the entire planet. There's one in Florida, Disneyland. Look it up. The ley lines have been weakened, and thus our barrier has been punctured. And because of the actions of CERN and others, we're having interdimensional energies and entities bleeding through as well. And it's because as humans, we use very little of our brains, especially these days. And even as aware as we are, we physically cannot at the moment, see these entities. Yet they still interact with us. We can ignore them because they're right outside of our realm of perception. But we can't not interact with them. You see, they still affect us to some degree. And that's what we need to realize, is whether or not, sure, fine, I'm sure you don't believe in aliens. I know all of this is nuts. But what we have to realize is that we have been in contact with a number of entities and a number of creatures, so to speak, for quite some time. And it's because of this that they've either bestowed upon us technologies, different how would you say, different modes of thinking, different realities themselves, affecting our time stream, so to speak. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is now, because of all these different interactions, because of where we are in our reality, we're not necessarily sure what to do. The next step is basically overriding human. And this is why, as I said before, you can't talk about transhumanism without talking about the alien agenda, but you also cannot talk about the technocracy without talking about transhumanism and subsequently the technocracy. There's a lot of different things that come into play when we're looking at this, but what we need to understand as well is that while all this is going on, think about the power that you have. Think about the gifts that you've been given, as well as the time frame. I know all of this sounds wildly outsane, but I'll put it to you this way. Hundreds of thousands of kids and over millions of different adults, and you can check this out, it's in the FBI, the CIA, and defense databases, disappear nearly every year. It's gone. And people think that there's no way that some kind of, an extraterrestrial civilization, a breakaway civilization society, or anything of the like, have taken these people to interact with them. What I think we need to look at in a different mindset, is the fact that, or what we need to realize now, is that these people are here. They have integrated. As Dr. David M. Jacobs says, their orders now are to integrate, socialize, make themselves seem normal. You see, their past, our past, their future. It's so hard. I'll get it straight eventually. But it's because we look at all of these different things, and we have to in such a complex way to understand that the Large Hadron Collider is basically just that, a key into the abyss. And this is why I said it taps into prophecy, how it's been ordained that at this time frame, with the Tower of Babylon, that we'll use this to try to knock God off of his stool, or to knock God off of his place. And we constantly say this, the idea that with transhumanism, we're altering the image of God. We're altering our face. We're altering the legacy. We're altering what he's done for us. That's why we're talking about the blurring of lines, the blurring of reality, the changing, the shift, because this is that time frame. Right there, secret executive orders and DoD directives allow for illegal targeting and human experimentation. And as I said before, these are articles that are coming out now, guys. And I don't think a lot of people truly understand the types and the time that we're in. These underground bases, they have generational people that have been living there. The breakaway civilization has been in operation for quite some time. This is why you hear me say the Nazis They kind of won World War II. The Nuremberg trials were a dog and pony show. It was simply for the war efforts, showing people that, someone had to be taken to trial. And if you guys are listening, you just missed a slide of a underground base, or the slide of an underground base where an individual is driving in. He's taking pictures. I also have video as well where you see semis carrying loads, and like like a loading dock would be, there's trucks going in and there's trucks coming out. And that's happening. I mean, we already hear how, quote, the elite are running to their shelters. Thanks, Alex Jones. We hear that, but that means that they would have had to be there for quite some time. And if this is, as I said before, these times now, what happened in our past? What happened to get us to this point to where we are now? As I said before at the start of the show, reverse engineering transhumanism with an alien agenda mindset. The idea that these creatures have come in to basically alter and impact us subsequently on a so much larger scale than we believe. My hardest thing for whenever I was putting together this episode was trying to figure out what is the easiest way to tell people that there is so many different races that we're basically creating our own races. Right there. Genetic engineering, financial engineering, and social engineering are not isolated events. It's like, at what point do we start talking about these types of things and realizing that we live in a broader universe than we're being told? That we have been basically terraformed. We've been washed over by these entities, by these creatures, by these people. And that there's more to us, there's more to the idea of what it means to be human than we think. You see. For people that are listening, there's a diagram up right now where it has security and communications, how human staff's housing, execs and labs, mind control experiments, alien housing, genetic experiments, and cryogenic storage, as well as a slide that says mechanisms behind epigenetics are still widely misunderstood. And that's simply because, as I said before, this is the time frame to where we are trying to rapidly change the face of man, to change what it means to be human. Those experiments from the 50s, from the Eisenhower Gray Treaty, as far as I'm concerned, they've come into fruition. As I constantly say, we are involved in a cosmological war, a spiritual war, a grander scene than most people can even comprehend. But it's because we have been systemically dumbed down, suppressed, and mind controlled that we're not able to put these pictures together. We're just now discovering apparently a new state of matter, plasma, as if it was never here. Or if it has been here or recently made, is it because of all the different actions that these people are doing? As I said before, the chemtrails, the messing with the geological chemistry of the earth, the changing of the rate of the planet, the Schumann resonance, punching holes into our atmosphere, messing with basically how the nations form, messing with the electromagnetic forces of the planet. There's a number of things that we have to look at, like I said before, when we dive into this. We have Elon Musk coming out. Recently, Bank of America also came out as well, saying that we might live in a holographic universe. And this is them somewhat giving credence to the idea that we live in this electric universe, this holographic matrix, this reality that we end up creating. I told you guys I was going to talk about how, as being creatures of a multidimensional aspect, we operate on more levels. This is constantly why, as I said before, we're telling people to wake up, get the fluoride out of your pineal gland right there. If you think the president has any power at all, then the fluoride is obviously working. There's more to you. You can look into things such as chakras. That's a prime example of it. Auras, and these are not new age things. These are things that people are basically rediscovering. You got to realize that we have had a lot of knowledge suppressed by the Vatican and other governments. We have had archaeology run amok. Its history, according to the Smithsonian and Wikipedia, we've, like I said before, lost what it means to be human. And by looking at things in a vibratory manner and an electric magnetic manner, it really begins to put a lot more things into play. I could do an entire show on the history of how being redundant, being in a, what I'm basically trying to tell you guys, is that with this time frame, with this transitional period that we're in, being impacted by these external forces, we're altering human. We have been altered, and there's a grander scheme at play. There's a grander agenda at play. And if all these things are coming into fruition now, what's in store for our future? This is why I focus so heavily on things like Agenda 2030, the technocracy, what they have planned down the line. Because if they're talking about it, what aren't they talking about? You see, this is why things like the gene drive, CRISPR-Cas9, genome editing, even at the World Economic Forum this year, they talked about superhumans. DARPA's The Foundry, the MIT Harvard Joint Medical Research Foundation, places like the Valencia Institute, the Nanjing University. I really don't think a lot of people give the credit to the time frame that we're in, as I keep really trying to say right there. CIA director warns gene editing may threaten national security. It's because and if you guys want to hear a crazy story, go research Valiant Thor. This is apparently an alien that's working within our government. I think that is a fantastic story, but gene editing, the idea that people could rapidly be changing how their genes function, and subsequently how their children's genes function. And if this all doesn't sound like an anti-human agenda, then clearly I have not done my job in explaining to you how elaborate and how widespread this agenda is, and what it basically encompasses, what it basically means to do something, to say something, to realize you're more than, or at least if you don't think so, that these Chinese scientists can plan some human testing with genome editing tools for you. I'm sure they can come up with some ways to make you more than, you see. So if we haven't been interacting with aliens, then certainly we have been creating them and interacting in a different mindset, interacting with things that we can't see. Could it be that we are actually, in this time frame, in this new, I don't want to say necessarily new world order, that we've transitioned into this new reality, this new or ultimate reality. Speaking of which, and I kind of want to close this out and I'll use it as a way to open up the next installment into this with computers, with technology, with numbers, with artificial intelligence, and things like that. Realities. What we have to understand is that we live in a time frame now, and I've talked about this as well, with things like Jade Helm, and even the advent of all the technology. I mean, I'm sure you guys can put the pieces together. Everything, because of this technocracy that we're in, everything is digitized, everything is monitored, everything is calculated, categorized, and organized. This is how they want it. They need this information to see how our world, our mindset reacts. This is why they use things like the D-Wave quantum computing, the artificial intelligent sentient computer that has the capabilities, or has the processing power of 7 billion different human brains. Think about that. It's already self-aware and has the capabilities of 7 billion different human brains. They're using this, right? They're using this artificially intelligent computer to create passwords, to create encryptions, to create programs, solutions, to run millions of different formulas and algorithms to try to basically break down our world. So to bring it back down without getting lost in the chaos and the glitz and glamour, what I'm basically talking about is they have quantified our reality to some degree. As Jade Helm would put it, as I've tried to reference throughout it, the human domain. This adiabatic quantum computation, what they're trying to do, and they actually released this earlier. I think was it earlier this year? I'm not sure if it was earlier this year or last year, but their Model 512, right? It operates by parallel dimensions, by sending things in I think it's 50 or I don't have the statistics here with me right now, but the recent one, the new D-Wave, the 2010 model, it operates in 2 to the 4,000th power parallel dimensions. It's running whatever program or creating any scenario with a mindset from roughly 2 to the 4,000th power dimensions, parallel dimensions, running different ways of living. And this is how the Chinese physicists, the scientists, this is how they actually launched recently the computer into space, the satellite into space, saying how it was unhackable. What they're basically doing is creating, as I said before, and this is why I've had to work it the way I did, they're using it to further the breakaway civilization, to further the secret space society. You see, they said they'll even conduct cloning experiments on this satellite, and they actually have cloning experiments. NASA has actually talked about doing cloning experiments, genetically modifying them as well. There's so many different things that come with this, as I said before, making aliens, and this is where we are these days. To reverse engineer a pretty crazy concept, honestly, to where we are these days. Right there, U.S. government to lift ban on part human, part animal embryos. Ban implying that, clearly they were met with it once. It was denied. They came back. They lifted the ban. Modified human embryos are ready to be created in the UK. So the part human animal hybrid, that was August 4th of 2016, and now they're working on human embryos they said at January 15th of 2016 that the embryos were ready to be made. So basically what I'm trying to illustrate to you guys as I keep reiterating is that we're making aliens. We're making that time frame. That technology is being passed down on a commercial level to where now anyone can splice themselves. While the world was asleep, scientists were moving full speed towards human cloning. And this is why we live in a time frame to where cryonics labs will house 50,000 bodies awaiting synthetic immortality. It's because we're using this technology that was basically given to us through the Nazis, that was occultly inspired and passed down onto us. We're using this fallen technology to do fallen things, to corrupt ourselves, to choose, basically, do we want to serve the kingdom of God, where we can live as humans, where we operate as God intended, or do we live as Satan wants us to, how our adversary would want us to? The sex, the drugs, the violence, all of that. But he passes it off in such a beautiful way. He makes sin look so glorious. You see. So as I asked earlier, who are these people getting their information from? Where is this technology coming from? I mean, if Wernher von Braun, one of the top scientists that we were given, admits to getting his information from the other side. Jack Parsons, a now known occultist, did the Babylon working ritual when he started NASA. Even Nikola Tesla, with his spirit crystal radio, has also inferred that yes, some of my information has come from another source. Where is this information coming from? I don't want to say this is an anti-human agenda, but we are surely in the time of a hybrid humanity. We're surely in the time to where the universe is being reconfigured. And while it is reconfiguring, we ourselves are reconfiguring with it. As I said before, them changing the hertz of the planet from 432 to 440. And if you guys are curious about what that means, it's a musical math. It's the vibration of the planet. And it might sound like it's, it might sound like it's in harmony, 440, but just take a listen at what 432 versus 440 sounds like, and that's really what it boils down to, because there's a lot that comes, as I keep reiterating, with looking at a plasma electric universe, talking about things such as the ether and the medium, pulling in that information into this reality and what it's doing into us, augmenting man, so to speak. And this is why, unfortunately, I have to give credit to people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking. This is why they say don't send signals out into space, because you're not sure what you're going to get back. These people might say they're bestowing to us fantastic technologies, but what is the cost, you see? Because it seems like these days we're losing our humanity. The people are at each other's throats. Maybe it could be the chemtrails, maybe it could be the vaccines, maybe it could be the GMOs, maybe it's the fluoride in the water, maybe it's a number of things. But if having all of this advanced technology degrades our morality, we have to ask ourselves, is it really worth it? Right there, scientists install memories in the DNA of human cells. You see. For the people that are listening right now, there is a fantastic clip of the CERN symmetry, or the CERN turbulence video, where they basically came out and projected onto their machine elaborate graphics that detail the coming in of spirits, the dancing of energies, however you want to look at it. What I'm trying to illustrate to you guys is basically what this interpretive video is doing. The cracking of the time frame of the realm of the plane. You know, the opening of the abyss. And we never know what's on the other side of it, you see. I think it's funny how whenever, we look at things like CERN, the development of that type of technology, we don't necessarily talk about the occult implications. I mean, other than us knowing that it is built to open portals. What about the fact that with the Gotha Tunnel ritual, which was a few miles away, they basically did a mock ritual to Lucifer, the opening of the portal, with all kinds of with all kinds of different beings, creatures coming through, angels coming through. And that's another topic as well. The idea that angels just means Latin and demon just means something that you can't see or that is evil. We use these very broad terms for a demonic hierarchy, basically, or a divine council. You see, there's so many different ways to look at the life in which we have been impacted by. That it's not only, it's never just as simple as, well, these guys are evil. The complexities of good and evil are so much more than that. It is so much more. But that's why we have to understand, as I've said before, now the things that we have to deal with, now the things that we are faced with. We live in a society to where up is down and down is up. As I've said before, the transitional time frame to where everything means nothing and nothing means everything. Nothing has meaning. An amoral time frame. And it's because of this, what I would only consider genetic genocide or mental mass murder, however you want to put it. There's so many different things that are affecting us that I can understand how this would drive anyone insane. But it's understanding what it's all for, who wins at the end of it all, really. Because, I mean, and this is, call me a geek, call me a Bible thumper, whatever you want to call me. But this is why, I like to read the Bible sometimes, because you when you read it, you hear so much more. You really do. I mean, it gets overwhelming, because it tells you about a lot of this stuff. But I'm just not that type of researcher. But it constantly talks about the paranormal world that we're living in. And so do so many other cultures as well. If anything, we're at a point to where we're repeating history. I mean, chimeras, Thoth, Anubis, I mean, a griffin. You see? I don't think we give ancient cultures the respect they deserve. Atlantis? There's so many different things that come with simply understanding how history has been whitewashed by the Smithsonian, and how archaeology has been changed, how it's been destroyed, so to speak, and all kinds of other things. Whenever you look at history, you really see how it's playing out today. I mean, this is why, even with the giants, the redhead giants of North America, again, that leads credence to the Bible, to a supernatural reality. And there's so much more that comes into this, and I know I jumped all over the place, as I usually do, but I hope I made it legible enough for you guys to get the gist of it, to truly understand the impact that coming into contact with an extraterrestrial force, with interdimensional beings, with whatever you would want to call them, how that has affected us in more ways than one, and how it's clearly going to get a lot more insane when you think about it. But I hope I gave you guys enough information to go out and go do your own research. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. I'll also have the info package of this episode so you guys can get the articles and the videos that you see.